What was it that, as you're reading the church fathers, made you not go the Roman Catholic route?
It was how they acted. People say all kinds of things, right? There's honorifics, there's flattery. Like, unfortunately, it's just a part of it that the church on earth has like a human element to it. So you're going to see flattery in letters, but all the things that uh, the papists will use to support their claim that Rome had universal, unhindered jurisdiction over all the faithful throughout the entire church, and they weren't subject to review by anybody. Every single quote, you can find an identical quote about another church. Like, I think St. Basil's letters, where he's
Yes.
talking about the church in Antioch. He says, the church in Antioch is the head of the church. What will the church do? The
Yeah.
body without its head. We need to have Meletius, St. Meletius, as the bishop
Right.
in Antioch. He's trying to get St. Athanasius on his side. And so you can't really put too much weight in these like political movements where they're trying to persuade somebody. You have to look at what they actually do. So in Roman Catholicism, I was like, okay, if I were to join Roman Catholicism today, what am I signing up for? And I just read through Pastor Eternus, and in my legal mind, the phrase that stuck out to me is that the Roman see is not subject to review by anybody. And the corollary to that in the American court system is the Supreme Court. It is not subject to review by anybody. It's the
Right.
highest authority. And Pastor Eternus actually uses that term, unsurpassed authority. They are saying that the Roman see is the Supreme Court in the church. And you just don't see anyone acting that way. Like, one proof that they like to use is Pope Celestine and how he excommunicated Nestorius prior to the Third Council. Okay, well, why do we have a review from scratch of that entire decision? They totally disregard Rome's decision. And then in the Third Ecumenical Council, they relitigate the entire issue from scratch. And
Exactly.
Nestorius is not treated as somebody who's excommunicated. He's treated as a bishop in good standing at the beginning of that council.
Yeah.
So these
Lateran
claims, yeah,
649. Why would you redo this at Constantinople 3 if Pope Martin at Lateran 649 has already ruled on the issue?
yeah. So we see right away that, like, hey, these claims that Rome is making about their role in the church is just not true. It's nobody acted that way. Uh, Maybe later on they have some claims, and I think that's why they have to get into the minutia of the Latin, and like, didn't Saint Maximus the Confessor like teach that Rome was divinely inspired? Well, there's another bishop that says the Patriarchate in Jerusalem is also divinely founded. I think has divine foundation. So you have all this flowery honorific language going either way. Okay, that's fine. What did they do? How did they act? And they didn't act
Yeah.
in a way that's conducive to the Roman Catholic
Well, the other
paradigm.
thing too is I've noticed amongst the Roman Catholic apologists that there's a heavy, heavy tendency, especially in the last 5 years of this discourse, and I've been in this, you know, contra Roman Catholic, pro Roman Catholic discourse since 2001, 2000, right in there is when I really started getting into these kinds of apologetics. And I noticed that it's gotten less and less academic, and it's actually more and more, at least on the internet sphere, um, like not even polemical. It's just more like meme warfare now, because the domain of the Roman Catholic apologists actually they tend to just completely ignore any counter objections. And when it comes to the way that we approach these topics, I think we do pretty good on the Orthodox side of dealing with the steel man of the Roman Catholic position. Okay, what's their strongest case? It's going to be, Hormisdas. It's going to be Pope Agatho's letter, right? So we're going to have to work through and deal with these. The Roman Catholic position, they don't even address the things that we bring up. It's never touched on, at least not in a lot of what I see. Maybe Jolene Heschmeyer has touched on it. I don't know, but we're going to talk about that here in a bit. But I mean, I just feel like they're just sort of breezing past, and they've long given up steel manning the positions, at least from the majority of their apologists.
Yeah, so like I said at the beginning of our talk here, that like when a lawyer will like analyze this, they'll be like, okay, what are the facts? Like, what happened? And then like, what is the law? What is the principle that you can draw out of what happened? So my investigation at first was like, okay, objectively, what happened? And I have Philip Schaff's 8-volume set on the history of the church. He's Protestant. He doesn't have a bone in this fight to be Roman Catholic or Orthodox. And I have a few other historical books up there. And if you just read the source documents themselves too, like nobody is going out of their way to submit to Rome. So when I went on this like fact finding expedition to be like, what exactly, like, let's get to the bottom of this. Like, what happened? It seemed very clear to me that like Roman Catholicism, that is not the correct church. It's not the church that you see for the first 1,000 years. It's certainly an innovation. And then that brought me to Holy Orthodoxy. And of course, I investigated, the non-Chalcedonian positions a bit. I just couldn't get over the tertium quid. And it really seems like they don't even really understand what their own position is.
Exactly.
And like, I don't want to talk too much smack here. I try to hold myself out as the Irenic one. When I've been doing this for 20 years, like Jay has, then I can bring myself to be like a little more curmudgeon-y here. But I really just, I don't think they understand what their position is. Whenever I hear them talk about it, it's just like, okay, so a composite nature. And they're like, no, not exactly. It's okay, what are you saying? And then, because I did catch a bit of the stream earlier, I understand why Kai is like, hey, you need to write down what you believe, because I don't know what you believe. I can't engage in a debate with you if I don't know your position. I don't want to be swinging at ghosts here.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about some of the material that you've produced lately, because I've been enjoying some of these videos, and
Thank you.
you hit on topics even and insights that I miss. And that's the great thing about Orthodoxy, is that we're not like we follow that one guy, right? We have a very synodal, very diffused gifts idea that even somebody who is not hasn't been in the church for 20 years, they can, even as a new convert, they can have insights, wisdom, and takes and new information that even somebody who's been studying this stuff for decades can miss. So we always have to be humble and try to be teachable by God's grace as best we can. You responded to Joe Heschmeyer, whatever it is, and in an excellent video. And so let's walk through a few of these, because I noticed as I watched his video and then your response, it was he did a little bit better than the average sort of Roman Catholic pop apologist does. I'll give him some credit for at least putting a little bit more time and effort into some of the argumentation. But let's talk about strong points and arguments that he relied on, and then some of your responses.
Sure. Well, I guess one of the parts from Joe's video that stuck out to me was, I think one of the strongest points he made maybe was about how can we identify what an ecumenical council is. And he brought up the Council of Florence. And for me, that was a bit of a stumbling block at first, because it was like, okay, did we accept, the filioque and all these papal claims or not? So I came across a stream with you and David Erhan talking about this issue. And there were a few book recommendations there. And like, guys, don't get me wrong. Streams are great. Podcasts are great. You can learn a lot, but nothing replaces buying the book and actually doing the work yourself and actually going through, underlining, notating, and interacting with the material yourself. So I bought a few books, and Ostromov's book on the Council of Florence, I think, was very enlightening. Yeah. So in Soshinsky's book, like you mentioned, he talks about how Roman Catholic apologists and polemicists have kind of abandoned this argument that Clement is asserting some sort of papal authority. They say that it's very clear that this is a one church writing to another church, not from some sense of authority, but a sense of like brotherly affection, like from one church to another sister church, to where it's like, hey, you guys should probably get your act in order, because like people are talking about, this squabble that you have within your leadership. And he talks about how like the apostles foresaw that there would be disputes like this, and they chose these people on purpose. So you shouldn't depose them without some sort of good reason. So yeah, he took that Clement approach, and also Saint Optatus. It's just usually the same story over and over again that you see with these Roman Catholic apologists, which from a litigation perspective, as a lawyer, that's kind of expected, because they have their story, we have our story. Now let's subject each of them to scrutiny and see which one wins out at the end of the day. So what I like to look at is like, okay, you have Saint Optatus, you have Saint Cyprian at about the same time, who basically says every bishop has the fullness of Peter within himself. And he says there is no bishop that is a ruler of bishops,
Right.
especially in his disputes with Saint Stephen. So, and also with Saint Optatus, I don't think you can discount the special relationship that Carthage has with Rome. Because if like literally you can pull up a map today and see that Carthage is just a stone's throw away from Rome. So although Carthage was its own independent like diocese, of course they had a special relationship with Rome. It had a special prestige within the early church. And I think that lens of viewing the different patriarchates in terms of prestige is probably the best way to see it. I don't think I've seen a better way to interpret those early documents.
Now you have some other good insights in the videos that you deal with relics, things like that. And I think that probably because you came out of a Pentecostal background, Protestant background like myself, I wasn't raised Pentecostal, but I was, charismatic. I
Right.
mean, I was charismatic for a little while, but I was eventually Calvinist and very serious about that. So I think we all deal with things like relics and intercession of saints and whatnot. And I really appreciated what you came up with in terms of like Moses' staff. I never even thought about that as like an Old Testament relic. So what was the hang up with you with relics, and then what was the kind of thing that flipped you over to being like, oh, okay, this makes perfect sense.
Well, it was just reevaluating the Bible and taking a systematic theology approach and just like kind of doing it on my own while building up this Orthodox phronema by reading the fathers, right? I think that's so important. It cannot be overstated. But it's in the same way that I went through the New Testament and I was like, okay, what exactly do they say about the church? Oh, wait, it's the pillar and grounds of the truth. The church is indefectible. The gates of Hades will not prevail against the church. And then the apostolic succession through the laying on of hands of Paul and Timothy. You see, a lot of these passages are just excluded completely from these Protestant circles because they don't help them. So I was like, okay, well, let's go through the New Testament. Let's see what it has to say about the church. Let's go through the whole Bible and see what it has to say about like sacred objects in general. So right away, you see like Joseph's bones were processed through the desert for 40 years.
Yeah, this is
And I was
another
like,
one that I didn't think about when I was Protestant. I remember hearing this when I first got into Catholicism. I was like, man, I never even thought about that. That Joseph's bones being, treated with such reverence could be also kind of a relic.
yeah, so I was thinking, surely there is something in the Jewish tradition about this. Like, there's no way they carried Joseph's bones around the desert for 40 years and nobody has anything to say about it. And when I looked through the Jewish Mishnah on passages about Joseph's bones, it sounded exactly like a procession in the Orthodox Church today that you see with relics. And I was like, man, really the continuity of the Abrahamic religion is not through modern day Judaism. It is through Orthodox Christianity. You see them doing the exact same things that they did with Joseph's bones. And the way they describe it in the Mishnah as well is like the passersby couldn't even tell like which ark was more special than the other one. Like clearly this is some like ornate box, a very ornate coffin that they're bringing, it says in the Mishnah, side by side with the Ark of the Covenant. So clearly, this is something that was held in high regard. And I guess the retort to that would be like, you don't see them kissing it, Alex, or bowing down to it. Well, I mean, they bow down to the Ark and to the temple. Those are also created
Exactly.
objects.
Right. Yeah, you see bowing to even earthly authorities, right? You see Joseph prostrating before Pharaoh. You see Elijah and Elisha. I mean, this prostration idea itself, I think, is something that I came to when I was, Calvinist coming into Catholicism back in 2002 or three. It was like, well, wait a minute. It can't just be the external bodily, movement that is the essence of the idolatry. First and foremost, because idolatry is an issue of the heart first. And then secondly, it's expressed and shown by the exterior actions of devotion. So clearly in the Bible, there's differences between, you know, uh, showing deference to authority versus actually sort of from the heart worshiping, even though the bodily movement itself might be the same, right? There's a difference there. And, like FDA is saying, like, there's a lot of times that for a Protestant, you just kind of approach the text with a very flat level of interpretation. Like, well, that verse, has to mean this, right? So, like, there's only one way to understand the word, idolatry or images, graven images or whatever. So it's like everything is flat, everything has one single referent, and there's no levels of nuance. And I think it was actually a good thing for me to read Jerome, back in the day, St. Jerome talking about the difference between showing honor and deference versus like worship, right? Because scriptures say honor your father and mother. So obviously I have a greater type of honor that I would give to God the Father versus my father and mother. But even within the Ten Commandments, you're instructed to show reverence and honor and devotion to even created beings and authorities.
Yeah, well, another passage that stuck out to me on this issue was Jacob's blessings to his sons. The blessing to Judah says that all of your brothers will praise you and they will bow
Yep.
down to
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
And
Great
also in
point.
Revelation, yeah, in the same vein where it
Jesus
says,
says, "I will bring those who hate you, down." They
"And
will.
they will bow down to
Exactly.
you." Yeah. So, this is God speaking here. This is not some Orthodox theologian, right? This is everybody can agree on the scriptures, I hope. At least on the basic 66 book canon, right?
Well,
So,
and what would you
there
say
was
to what would you say to somebody who said, "Well, but wait a minute though, Alex, that's Old Testament stuff. Like, what about the New Testament?" I remember one time I was reading this wasn't even an argument. I remember just reading one day Peter, and I was a Protestant, and I remember reading Peter's epistles, and he says he's talking about the transfiguration, and he mentions the holy mountain. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're not supposed to call places or things holy in the New Testament. That's an Old Testament thing. I remember that, like, I was really struggling with that one time when I was a Calvinist. I was reading Peter's epistles, and he calls it the holy mountain.
Yeah, there's a huge objection, I guess, within like neo-Protestantism to this idea that God can like sanctify matter, that God can use matter. But we see like I think the epistle to the Hebrews is like spot on in this because it's like, look, in the Old Testament we have shadows. In the New Testament, if we have a fulfillment, that's not an abolishment of it. It's ushering it in a way that's real now. Like ritual washing in the Old Testament, like yes, that was for as a tutor, as Paul says in Galatians, to teach people the ways of God. That like, hey, you are a human, God is God. You have to be holy, you have to sanctify yourself. In baptism in the New Testament, you get the real thing. When Christ is baptized and he sanctifies the water of baptism, you have a fulfillment of these things. A section in Religion of the Apostles really put this together for me from Stephen DeYoung when he was talking about like the Orthodox Church. This line still sticks with me today. It says the Orthodox Church holds to the Torah to a T. We hold to the Old Testament law to a T, but the fulfillment of it, where yes, we keep the Sabbath, it's fulfillment in Sunday,
Exactly.
in the Lord's Day. Yes, we maintain the law of the Torah. In Acts 15, it talks about how like these laws that they to not consume blood, to abstain from sexual immorality, to not worship idols, whatever. Those were all the laws in the Torah that applied to the Gentiles. So we keep all the laws to a T. We are the fulfillment. We are the continuation of this Old Testament.